Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Real Talk with Terry. And today I have two dynamic women of God with me who will share a very inspiring word about being single and in leadership in ministry. So thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy this episode. I don't think enough single women really take it serious, or if they even know the implications of soul ties and what it means to have ungodly soul ties. So that was something that you kind of touched on, Pastor Sheyna, when you were just talking about being single and dating in the church, and just being able to date appropriately, and just leaving the physical part out of it. And sometimes people wonder, what happens when I have sex with somebody, and well, what you need to know is you become one with them. And I think we're all adults, and if you don't know, that's what consummates a marriage. Not when you say I do, but God's way is when you have sex with the person, in God's eye, you're married. You consummate the marriage. You become one with that person. Now you have a soul tie with that person. So I just want to talk about that a little bit, because I don't think enough women realize the implications of really just what a soul tie is and what that means. Because a lot of times, we all have our own dreams, our own goals. And sometimes when you get with another person and all of a sudden you become interested in what he's interested in, you know what? That's a soul tie. And I don't think a lot of people really realize that. So I want to turn it back over to you, Pastor Sheyna, first, to just kind of talk about that, the ungodly aspect of it, just, ungodly soul ties, the implications of that, and just why women just need to be so careful who they get with.
Well, it's interesting because soul ties are things that many times we don't even recognize are there. One of the ways you'll know if you still have a soul tie with someone is if someone mentions that person's name and you cringe, or you still have an attitude, or feel some type of way about that person. There's probably still some connection there, and we don't recognize how much of that plays into the next relationship. Once we become one with someone else, and then you become one with someone else, and then you become one with someone else. Now there's 4 people in this relationship that you have just found, quote unquote, the perfect person. And when that happens, we want them to treat us this way, or I can't even think about doing that because so-and-so did that to me and it hurt me. And so we don't really have an opportunity to allow that new person to be themselves and for us to have our own kind of relationship, because we've got so many other things and other people in the mix. And I believe that's why God is so clear about wanting us to remain celibate before we get married. And I know people have made mistakes. I mean, I've made mistakes before I was married too. The biggest thing that I understand is that God will forgive you. Amen. God will cleanse you. And if you just simply ask him, Lord, break this tie that I have with this person. Forgive me, Lord, for, what I've done, and let me forgive myself, because a huge part of the soul tie is we don't forgive ourselves for some of those bad choices we made. We can't believe we allowed ourselves to be with that type of person. But if you forgive yourself, then it does this kind of cleansing thing spiritually where you can move on. But you got to be careful, if you are cleansed and you are free, not to just pop back in the bed with somebody else, because you're creating more and more ties. So it's not just the physical intimacy. It's a soul connection that is not easily broken.
It's not. And that's a great point. It's not easily broken. And you really have to go through a cleansing and a prayer process. And I can only speak for myself, because I made mistakes before I was married as well. I wasn't a virgin. I had sex before my husband. And I remember that was part of my process of preparation, where, I just went through this time where I was just praying, and I was before God, and I was like calling out names. I was like, Lord, I don't even want to remember what he looked like. I don't even want to remember what he smells like, because I wanted my slate clean for my husband. And that was part of just my process of cleansing myself from those ungodly soul ties, people that I wasn't meant to be with in the first place. So I think more single women really need to realize that soul ties are serious. I mean, and if you don't break that tie, you said something key. You take that right into the next relationship, and you don't give that other person a fair chance, because you still have residue from another person or other persons. So we have to be really careful and just really take soul ties more seriously than we do. And did you want to say anything about that, Elder Paulette?
Yeah, I think it's very important for us to keep ourselves celibate. And that's one of the main reasons why, because we want to make sure that we don't give ourselves over to another person sexually when, one, we don't even know if he's going to marry us. And two, yes. And then two, also, men and women have a different perspective when it comes to sex. For men, it's just sex. For women, we get all emotional, we get tied to them because we want that physical intimacy. And so we look at sex differently than a man does. And so going into a relationship, and it's so important for us to keep ourselves holy. And so if we know that, you know what, I can't be with you like that, then that's the ground, that's the stance you have to take with the man, you know. And so you keep yourself in that light, knowing that, you know what, I'm keeping myself, I'm saving myself for the man God has for me. And if he wants to wait for me and he really does love me, he's going to wait until that night.
Amen.
Yeah.
And I just want to reiterate that too, because, you know, a lot of women think, because I even thought that as a single woman, I was like, oh my God, like what man is going to be in agreement with this, with my vow of celibacy until I marry? I'm like, no man is going to want that. That was my thinking. And, you know, and I just prayed to God. I was praying and praying. I was like, Lord, I can do it, but whoever can a man do it? And my word to single ladies is, you know what? Yes, because the word that the Lord, you know, put in my spirit was, you know what, Terry, that's how you're going to know that the man that I've ordained for you is the right one, because he's going to be in total agreement with that. And I even talk about that in my book when I met my husband, and, you know, we were getting to know each other, and I shared with him that I had taken a vow of celibacy, that I was not a virgin, but I had cleansed myself and I was preparing myself for a husband, a mate, and that I had taken a vow of celibacy. And I was like, and I am not having sex until I get married, and it's the night of my wedding. And was kind of like, can you get with that? And, you know, and he could. He was like, you know what? He was like, I'm fine with that. He was like, because, you know what? I don't intend on having sex again until I'm married, you know? And I'm like, oh, thank you, Jesus. Because, you know, and that's something that, you know, single women need to realize is that there are men out there. They're Christian men, because, again, we're talking about Christian men. You know, we're not talking about people that are in the world, because, you know, I've had coworkers, when I talk about having a, you know, taking a vow of celibacy, they've laughed at me. I remember it vividly. In the kitchen on one of my jobs, and, you know, and talking about, you know, waiting for a husband and reading books and doing Bible studies, and telling some coworkers that I was being celibate and being laughed at. And I was like, you know what? The things of God don't make sense to people in the world. So I'm going to stay at it, because I know that God's way is the right way. And you can laugh at me, you can make fun, but you know what? I'll be fine, because I'm going to do this God's way. And I think a lot more single women really need to take stock of that. So thank you, ladies, for sharing. And, you know, and along those lines, do you guys feel like that there is like one soulmate, or just address that, because that's always a big issue too. Like, you know, is there just like one ordained soulmate for me? What do you have to say about that? Because you're like anxious to say something.
I think God has someone special for you. Regardless of who it is, each of you have to work on yourselves, you know. So there's always that process and that progression that has to go on in your own individual life, your own walk with the Lord, just like with Him. So I think God does have somebody for you, someone that fits you, fits who you are, fits your personality, fits your way, and fits who you are as a child of God.
Okay. And what about you, Pastor Sheyna?
I agree with that. I just don't think that there's just one.
Right. That there can
be multiple ones.
Exactly.
For people such as myself, you know, my husband was definitely my soul and spirit mate. We were one in spirit, one in soul, and he's in heaven now. So to think that there is not another one out there is really just not true. I'm sure there are multiple people who could possibly fit the bill, so to speak. But I do believe, as she said, that God has a purpose for each person. And the question is do our purposes intertwine with one another so that we're both on the same page doing what we believe the Lord has called us to do. Are we better together or better apart? I mean, I think that's the part of it. I think people think soulmates are about the butterfly feelings and not about our destiny and not about our purpose. Because being a soulmate really is, does this person help me to fulfill the purpose God has in my life? And do I help them fulfill that purpose? I mean, in fact, that is what being a helpmate for a woman should be. I should be helping you fulfill your purpose. But if that's not the case, we've got an issue. And as a single pastor, you want to talk about soulmates. I mean, it really becomes a serious issue. Can you help me fulfill the purpose that God has on my life? And what's interesting for me is I'm not looking for what I looked for the first time. You know, the first time it was different. So I'm a different woman than I was the first time. When I married my husband, I wasn't a pastor. I wasn't in ministry. I wasn't a single mom. So what I'm looking for, I was glad to have a person in ministry. Now, I want you to be saved, love the Lord, filled with His Spirit, but I don't really care if you're in ministry because your ministry is out there. It doesn't have to be in the church for me. So I think it's important that we recognize that, we're different people at different times of our lives. So what we want may be different. And as long as we're willing to put the work in, it doesn't matter if they're, maybe what we wanted before, if they were the perfect one 20 years ago. Is it who God has for me today?
Exactly. And you're exactly right. Is it who God has for me, and just making sure that we're coming together on one accord. So, and you're absolutely right. A soul tie is not a person that's going to make you have butterflies and get all excited. That's not what being a soul tie is. That's not what being a soulmate. It's about having purpose and fulfilling God's purpose and mission on our lives and calling. So thank you for that. This has been some great dialogue. We're going to keep it going. And we're going to, again, change gears a little bit. And I want to talk more about, from a leadership and a pastoral perspective, something that I've noticed in the church probably over the last 15 years or so, and that is singles. They seem like they're just kind of scattered. They're all over, that they're scattered. I notice a lot of singles ministries have just vanished. A lot of churches, they no longer even have singles ministries. And I just want you guys, from a leadership standpoint, to just talk about the transition that you've seen. Like, 15, 20 years ago when I was single, it was very popular. I mean, every church had a singles ministry. I was a part of various singles ministries activities, but now you call a church and they're like, no, we don't have a singles ministry, or no, we're rebuilding, or we're trying to, get it going again. So just from a leadership perspective, could you just share with us, just what that trend has been, or what you've seen? And, we'll start with you, Elder Paulette. What have you seen over these last 15 years or so in terms of singles ministries?
Yeah, I think people, when it comes to the singles ministry now, I think people just kind of find their niche with one another. And if we want to, hang out with one another, we just do, I mean, I know that there's still some churches that do have singles ministries, but those that don't, we really just kind of find, who's single. We find out if we have things in common with one another, if there's some activities that, we want to do. We just kind of partner like that, One of the things that I've been doing is I just kind of been posting some events on Facebook about some things that, I want to do, and I invite other singles. And so I've been doing that. So I've found, if there's other activities that I want to do, I just, try to reach out to other singles, male and female, and see if they want to, go to those events, and we just do it like that.
Interesting. That's very interesting. And what about you, Pastor Sheyna, just from a pastoral perspective?
I think that our singles ministries are dwindling in the church. And I think that the reason is the purpose of singles ministry is different now for people than it was maybe 15, 20 years ago. In my experience, what I find is that the first time single ministry goers think, I'm going to find somebody there. There's going to be other single men there, there's going to be other single women. And if you're in a small church, like our church is a relatively small church, you've already seen all the single people that are in the church. There's not going to be anybody new, So the fun thing is that, you maybe can connect with another church or other ministries that have those type of events. But the reality of of it is I think singles don't want to go to singles ministry because we miss the purpose of singles ministry. Singles ministry has always been about empowering you to be a single Christian and walk with God. It has never been about being a dating service. But I think that people who show up want it to be a dating service. And so I don't have to go to singles ministry to get a dating service when I've got all these .coms that will give me a dating service, you know. And so I think that the challenge becomes, you know, women are going looking for men are going and women are either all over them or they don't want to deal with all of this drama. You know, it's just, it becomes too much. So I think that the church wants to provide things to help singles, but I think the challenge is we have to figure out how to help singles connect. And I think the problem really is we've got to start talking about being single from the pulpit too. Because we talk a lot about being married from the pulpit, but we don't talk a lot about being single. We don't talk a lot about being celibate from the pulpit. Well, we got some married folks and we got some divorced people and we got what. It doesn't matter. It's still a part of people who are in our congregation, and we need to address it.
I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you said that it doesn't come from the pulpit enough. And in fact, my pastor just finished an entire series on kind of like the dating game. And that was one of his topics. He talked about it kind of from a singles perspective. And every week, you know, he hit married perspective, singles. So he kind of touched upon everybody. And you're exactly right. I thought that was kind of interesting because I was like, you know what? A lot of pastors don't really preach that much about being single and what it means to be a Christian single and living a victorious single Christian life. Because, I mean, being single is not a position of being disadvantaged. I mean, if you're appreciative of every season of your life, you know, God has us there for a reason. And, you know, I feel like, you know, if you have the right perspective as a single, you know, you can realize, oh my God, you know, I'm in a good season because in my single season, the only thing I really have to focus on is me, my relationship with Christ, doing what God has called me to do. I mean, if I want to be in the church Monday through Saturday or Sunday through Saturday, I have nobody to answer to. Versus when you get married, your priorities have to shift. And I don't think enough singles perhaps realize that. When you're single, I mean, you're not answering to anybody. The only person you have to answer to is yourself. And you can serve however you want to serve. You know, you can travel, you can do things. I mean, it's just amazing. And, you know, just with the change of time and with seasons, you know, we're just living in such a digital age right now. And when you brought up the whole dating service, you're absolutely right. I mean, I don't know, 20 years ago, there maybe was like a Christian mingle, but I don't even know if it was called Christian Mingle. There may have been some site, but it wasn't nearly as popular as it is right now. I mean, it was almost like taboo to like be on a dating site 15, 20 years ago. Like, oh my God, that's creepy. You on a dating site? Like, who does that? You know, it's only weirdos. Whereas now, I know several people, close people, that have met their mate on a dating service, and they're still married, going strong, it's going good. So it's just very interesting to me how things have changed over the years with technology and how singles, they're not, in my opinion, really leaning on the church perhaps as much as they did when I was single. I mean, we congregated and we leaned on the church a lot for direction and, you know, and just for empowerment or, you know, I don't know, inspiration or just staying with it. I don't see that from a lot of singles right now. They're just kind of all over. So, so with that, I kind of want to go back to something that you said, because I always want to get people's perspective on it and talk about, can you outgrow your spouse? Because I'm not going to call out the popular minister's name that said this, but in the church, there was a very popular minister that was married for a number of years. Him and his wife were in ministry, and he's on a show, and something that intrigues me about what he said was that he felt like he outgrew his wife at that time. And he was explaining that, you know, the wife that he had in his 20s wasn't the same wife that, you know, he needed in his 30s. And I always thought that was very interesting because I thought they were a dynamic couple. And I didn't think that was almost like possible. But you're shaking your head. So, I mean, I love to hear other ministers and ministries, you know, perspective on that. Like, can you outgrow your spouse?
I think you can, but I don't think that means you should divorce.
Right.
I think you have to learn to grow where that person is now, because you're right, your spouse at 20 is not the same spouse at 40. And what we have to learn how to do is, how do I love this person and stay in commitment with them, whether I think I've outgrown them or I haven't. Because the truth of the matter is God put us together for a reason. So maybe you're growing in a way that this person doesn't need to grow right now. Maybe, you know, when you think about the dynamics of ministry and being out there, somebody's got to stay home. Somebody's got to take care of the family. So it's okay if your spouse is not growing and wanting to speak or wanting to sing or wanting to play or wanting to do all the stuff or travel with you, because you got to have somebody that balances you. So the biggest thing is I think we need to accept the fact that people change, and maybe one does outgrow the other one. But the real issue is do we believe that God truly put us together? If he did, then we're going to stick together through this season, and we're going to work on what do we each need right now to help us continue to be the best that God has called us to be. If we can get that, then we'll have a whole lot of marriages in the church that might just last a little longer instead of divorcing. Because I really think we ought to say it's okay if you feel like you've fallen out of love with your spouse. Now figure out a way to get back in love with them.
Right.
Wow.
It's okay. It's natural. We're human. We're not going to be all lovey-dovey forever. Let's get real. But let's remember that we made a covenant. We did not make a contract.
Yes.
A covenant is one that cannot be broken. A contract, you have loopholes. We don't have a loophole in our marriage. We have an issue of two flawed beings who have to now learn how to work through this together. And that is what I think the church needs to be communicating to people. Don't give up. Don't give in. Yeah, so you're different? Oh well, now figure out how to be different in this new place together instead of doing it by yourself. Because I'll tell you something, being single again is hard work. It's not as easy as people think it is.
Right. And I love what you just said when you said about that thing about falling out of love, because so many people use that as an excuse to get a divorce. I don't love him anymore. I don't love her anymore. And you said something that was very key. It's not about being madly in love with them. It's about really growing old with them, you know, and I remember hearing that when I was single. Don't marry somebody that you're madly in love with, because you will probably fall out of love with them. Marry somebody who you want to grow old with. And I think more people really need to take stock of that. And I love when you said that it's okay to go through those dry seasons where it's like, you know what, I don't even know if I love him, or I don't even know if I love her. But it's about getting over that hump, because we're not in contract, we're in covenant. And that's key. We're in covenant. And I like that. We're in covenant, not just contract. Did you have anything you want to add to that? Do you think that somebody can outgrow their spouse or whatever, or just anything that you want to add to?
Well, you know what? I think if I feel that I've outgrown my spouse or him have, outgrown me, we both have to understand that neither one of us are in the same place that we were 20 years ago.
Right.
And so even though he may feel like he's outgrown me, maybe he has, but can he, help me get to that place of growth? Maybe he needs to, put more of the word in me and wash me more in the word and pray with me more. I mean, because there are some things that obviously he sees that I have not attained. That's his responsibility as the man of God and the leader in my home, to wash me so that I can grow into that woman that God has called me into. And so I think too also that when we're in a relationship with someone, I may not like you right now, but I'm still commissioned to love you.
Exactly.
And if I say that I don't love you, God can put that spark back in me. We serve a God of love.
Amen.
And so I can't rely and say that, you know what, I can justify me getting a divorce because I don't love you. That's not biblical. But God can put whatever back into our relationship, whatever back into our lives that we have been missing or we have been lacking, as long as we are committed to one another, that we're going to stay committed to one another in the things of God.
Amen. Well, I want to thank you ladies for being here today. This conversation has been great. I've enjoyed talking to you both. And if people want to perhaps visit your church or know more about your ministry, could you guys just, tell us how they can reach you or come to your church, Pastor Sheyna?
Sure, we'd love to have you at Rohi Christian Church. Probably the quickest way to reach us is just Rohi, ROHI, church.org, or you could check out Rohi Christian Church on Facebook. We'd love to have you. We meet here in San Jose.
Thank you. Well, anyone wants to reach me, they can go to my website, which is pauletteharper.com. I'm also on the social networks, on Twitter, LinkedIn, and then also on Facebook.
Thank you, ladies. This has been great. Thank you so much for coming out and talking to us today, and have a great evening.
Thank you for having
Thanks so
me.
much.
Thank you.
Elevate your life, put that on Christ, he paid the price for me. Now I'm crossing over, cause Jehovah came and set me free. He died and he rose, he's alive, this I know. So I'm free
from crying, free from my depression. Put my faith inside your love. Now I'm reaching for my blessing.
Cause he died and he rose, he's alive, this I know. I'm crossing over, I crossed over, I put the cross over.